Imagine for a moment that everything you learned about the Knights Templar is a lie. Imagine that the history they told you in schools, in books, even in churches, was carefully rewritten to hide something so powerful, so dangerous, that the Catholic Church itself decided to erase it from history for 800 years. In 1307, in a single night, thousands of knights were arrested, tortured, and burned alive. Their crime? They knew too much. They knew a secret that came from King Solomon 3,000 years ago. A secret that, if revealed, could destroy the foundations of religious power in the West. Today, I'm going to tell you this story, and I warn you, after you know this, you will never look at the Bible the same way again. Stay until the end, because what you are about to discover was forbidden for 8 centuries. Jerusalem, year 970 before Christ. The city still smelled of incense and blood from sacrifices when Solomon, son of David, ascended to the most powerful throne in the ancient world. He was only 20 years old, but his eyes carried a wisdom that frightened even the elders. They say that on the first night as king, he had a dream. God appeared before him and said, "Ask for whatever you want, and I will give it to you." Solomon did not ask for riches. He did not ask for glory. He asked for wisdom. And God, satisfied with the answer, gave him not only wisdom but knowledge. Knowledge about things that no man should know. And that's where it all began. In the following years, Solomon built the Temple of Jerusalem. But it was not just a temple. It was a perfect geometric structure, aligned with constellations, built with mathematical proportions that still intrigue architects today. Inside it, in the most sacred place called the Holy of Holies, Solomon kept the Ark of the Covenant, but he kept something more, something that very few knew: manuscripts, scrolls, ancient knowledge. Solomon had access to texts that came from Egypt, from Babylon, from Sumeria. He studied astronomy, alchemy, natural magic, sacred geometry. He conversed with wise men from all nations. And according to apocryphal texts, those books that the church decided not to include in the Bible, Solomon had power over demons. He commanded them. He imprisoned them. He used this knowledge to build, to heal, to govern. But Solomon knew that this knowledge was dangerous. He knew that in the wrong hands, it could destroy nations. So, before he died, he did something extraordinary. He created a secret order, a select group of priests, scribes, and warriors, men he personally trained. Men who swore to protect this knowledge until the end of their lives. They had no name. They left no traces. They lived in the shadows of the temple, guarding the secrets that Solomon had discovered. And when Solomon died, these men disappeared. They took the scrolls with them. They hid them in the depths of the temple. And they waited. They waited for 2,000 years because they knew that one day someone would come looking. Someone worthy. Someone who understood the true purpose of that knowledge. And in 1118, in the year of our Lord, 9 French knights arrived in Jerusalem. It was a cold morning when Hugh de Payens and his 8 companions presented themselves to King Baldwin II of Jerusalem. They were poor knights. Their armor was worn, their horses thin. But in their eyes there was something different, a determination, a conviction. They told the king that they wanted to protect the Christian pilgrims who came to visit Jerusalem, a noble cause, but the king was suspicious. Why only 9 men? Why would such poor knights volunteer for such a dangerous mission? Even so, the king granted them permission to settle on the Temple Mount, in the exact place where, 1,000 years before, Solomon's temple had been erected. Now, only ruins remained. And it was there, in those ruins, that the 9 knights began to dig. For 9 years, they dug. 9 years without recruiting a single new member. 9 years without protecting a single pilgrim. 9 years digging in the depths of the Temple Mount. And then, in 1127, something changed. Suddenly, the 9 poor knights returned to Europe. But now, they were rich, incredibly rich. They had contacts with kings, popes, nobles. They officially founded the Order of the Knights Templar, and in less than 2 decades, they became the most powerful organization in Europe. They created the first international banking system. They owned land in all Christian kingdoms. They answered only to the Pope. They were untouchable. But what did they find in that temple? Official historians say nothing, that the Templars simply became rich through donations. But think with me, 9 poor knights digging for 9 years in secret, and suddenly they become the most powerful men in Christendom? It doesn't make sense, unless they found exactly what they were looking for. The Scrolls of Solomon. And what was written in those scrolls changed everything, because there, hidden for 1,000 years, was the knowledge that Solomon had kept. Knowledge about the true nature of God, about the universe, about the power of the human mind, about sacred geometry, about alchemy, about healing, about things that the church would never allow people to know. The Templars began to build cathedrals, but they were not ordinary cathedrals. They were structures based on sacred geometry, with golden proportions, astronomical alignments. They knew how to build buildings that amplified energy, that created altered states of consciousness. They knew secrets that humanity had forgotten, and they knew something more, something that, if revealed, would destroy the church. They knew that Jesus Christ was not what the church taught. Take a deep breath, because what I'm going to tell you now is the reason why the Templars were destroyed. In the Scrolls of Solomon, there were references to a lineage, a sacred lineage that came from ancient times. And according to these texts, Jesus was part of that lineage, but not as the Son of God in the sense that the church teaches. Jesus was an initiate, a master, a man who had reached such a high level of consciousness that he understood the laws of the universe. Jesus had family, he had descendants, and the church knew this. But if this were revealed, all the power of the church would crumble, because the church built its empire on the idea that Jesus was divine, unique, inaccessible. If people knew that Jesus was human, that he had children, that anyone could reach the same level of consciousness, the church's control over the masses would end. The Templars discovered this, and they began to question. They began to create their own interpretation of Christianity, a Gnostic, esoteric interpretation which placed inner knowledge above blind obedience to the church. They began to venerate Mary Magdalene, because according to the scrolls, she was not just a follower of Jesus, she was his companion, his equal, the guardian of his most secret teachings. And the church realized that the Templars knew too much. For decades, the church tried to control the Templars. It tried to infiltrate spies. It tried to buy their loyalty. But the Templars were too powerful. They had armies, they had money, they had influence, until Pope Clement V and King Philip IV of France made a plan. On Friday, October 13, 1307, in a coordinated strike, thousands of Templars were arrested at the same time throughout Europe. The accusations were absurd: heresy, worship of pagan idols, satanic rituals. But none of that mattered. The goal was to destroy the order before it could reveal what it knew. The Templars were tortured, burned alive, their treasures were confiscated, their lands taken, and in 1312, the Pope officially dissolved the order. But here is the detail that history does not tell. Many Templars escaped. The night before the arrests, Templar ships left France carrying the scrolls, the treasures, and the knowledge of Solomon. Some went to Portugal, others to Scotland. Some say they reached America 200 years before Columbus. And those Templars who escaped founded new secret orders. Orders that exist to this day, with other names, other symbols, but with the same purpose: to preserve the forbidden knowledge of Solomon. Have you ever wondered why the Catholic Church burned millions of books during the Middle Ages? Why did the Inquisition persecute scientists, philosophers, alchemists? Why were ancient texts systematically destroyed? Because the church was looking for something. It was trying to erase any trace of Solomon's knowledge, any vestige of Templar teachings, but knowledge is like water. You can try to hold it, but it always finds a way. In the Renaissance, artists like Leonardo da Vinci began to insert occult symbols into their works, symbols that came from the sacred geometry of Solomon. The Last Supper by da Vinci is not just a painting, it is a coded map. Look at the position of the hands, at the arrangement of the apostles, at the figure next to Jesus. That person is not John, it is Mary Magdalene. Da Vinci knew. He was part of a secret society that kept this knowledge. The Freemasons emerged in Europe, and their ceremonies, their symbols, their architecture, everything comes directly from the Templars. The very name Freemason comes from Mason, the builders of cathedrals, the guardians of the sacred geometry of Solomon. And today these groups still exist. Secret societies that meet in silence, that control governments, banks, corporations, not because they are evil, but because they know something that the rest of the world has forgotten. They know that true power does not lie in kings or popes. It lies in knowledge, in self-knowledge, in the human capacity to transcend, to create, to connect with something greater. Solomon knew this 3,000 years ago. The Templars rediscovered it, and they paid with blood for this discovery. So, what really happened? The truth is that Solomon was not just a king. He was a guardian of ancient knowledge. Knowledge that came from Atlantis, from forgotten civilizations. Knowledge about how reality works. About how the human mind can shape the physical world. About how to access higher states of consciousness. This knowledge was passed from generation to generation. Always in secret, always protected. The Templars were just one link in this chain, a link that the church tried to break, but could not. Because the knowledge is still here, in symbols, in architecture, in secret societies, in hidden texts, waiting for someone to have the courage to search. The church hid this story for 800 years because it knew that if people knew the truth, they would no longer need intermediaries. They would no longer need priests, bishops, popes. They would realize that the divine is within them, and that is the true secret of Solomon. It was not magic, it was not demons. It was the knowledge that every human being carries within themselves the divine spark, the ability to create, to transcend, to become more. The Templars died protecting this, but the message survived. And now, you know, so I ask you, do you believe this story is real, that the church really hid this from us? Or do you think it's just a conspiracy theory? Leave your comment. Tell me what you felt when you heard this. Because if this video reached you, maybe it's not by chance. And if you had the courage to stay until here, subscribe to the channel. Because this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are other secrets, other stories that were erased. But I only share them with those who are ready to hear. Until the next video, if you have the courage to watch it.